When I bought the house on Lakeview Ridge, I thought I was buying peace, privacy, and the perfect retirement retreat. A place where I could slow down, enjoy my garden, and sip my morning coffee in silence, far removed from the corporate meetings and infrastructure headaches that came with running Cascade Springs utilities. I had worked for over 20 years in water management, and for the last 8, I'd served as CEO of the very water company responsible for the supply lines beneath every driveway in this community. My house was the reward for decades of early mornings, late-night calls, and 60-hour work weeks spent negotiating utility contracts, reviewing infrastructure blueprints, and keeping city officials happy. It was a craftsman-style home, tucked at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by hydrangeas, mature trees, and neighbors who waved politely when they passed. It came with everything I dreamed of: an elevated garden bed system, a smart irrigation network, a fish pond, and a stone patio that backed up to a small creek. But what the real estate listing failed to mention was that it also came with Karen. Karen McDougal, HOA president, power-tripping suburban tyrant. If you've never had the misfortune of living in an HOA-controlled neighborhood ruled by someone who treats the bylaws like divine scripture, count yourself lucky. Karen introduced herself within 20 minutes of the moving truck pulling into my driveway. She didn't smile. She didn't bring cookies. What she did bring was a clipboard, a pen, and a wrinkled copy of the HOA welcome packet, which she handed to me like a court summons. "We pride ourselves on keeping Lakeview Ridge pristine," she said without even making eye contact. "Please make sure to review the water usage guidelines on page 12. That was my first red flag. My garden hose hadn't even touched the faucet yet. I hadn't unpacked a single box. Yet Karen had already sized me up as a violator. I nodded, thanked her, and watched her walk off like a crossing guard on a power trip, dog leash in one hand, clipboard in the other. At first, I chalked it up to the usual neighborhood overzealousness. Maybe she was just doing her job, I told myself. That illusion didn't last long. By the end of the first week, I had received 2 emails and 1 printed note hand-delivered to my mailbox regarding my unauthorized water usage. The first was for rinsing off my driveway at 10 a.m., which apparently violated a non-peak watering clause. The second was for filling the koi pond on a Wednesday, which was not an approved watering day per the HOA's biweekly rotation chart. The third was a full-page memo titled "Tips for Responsible Water Use," stapled to a printed picture of my backyard with a red circle drawn around my hose reel. I checked the HOA guidelines and confirmed that everything I'd done was technically compliant, even generous compared to some of the other homes nearby. I wasn't overusing anything. But this wasn't about rules. This was about control, and Karen had found her new project. I quickly learned that Karen operated under the illusion that the HOA bylaws gave her full dominion over every spigot, shrub, and sidewalk within the neighborhood. And she especially didn't like that I had a complex irrigation system. I designed it myself, low-flow, multi-zone, pressure-regulated, and tied into a moisture sensor array that optimized watering efficiency by time of day and soil needs. It was the kind of system most HOAs would celebrate, especially in drought-conscious regions. But Karen, she called it excessive. One afternoon, I caught her outside with a measuring wheel and a camera, pacing around my side yard like she was mapping a crime scene. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Just documenting an ongoing concern for the compliance committee." She was the compliance committee. Her crusade ramped up from annoying to absurd when she started issuing fines. The first was for suspected water runoff, even though the pictures she attached to the notice showed rainwater, taken during a thunderstorm. The next was for unauthorized use of a hose during restricted hours, despite the timestamp being well within the window. I appealed both, and both were denied without explanation. At this point, I realized something critical. Karen didn't know who I was. She didn't know that the person she was harassing had oversight authority over the very water infrastructure she was pretending to govern. She didn't know that I'd personally approved the master water plan for this area. She didn't know that the meters in our neighborhood all reported to a smart monitoring hub I could access with a few keystrokes. And I wasn't planning on telling her. Not yet. You see, I've dealt with people like Karen before, people who mistake positional power for actual power. People who think clipboards and bylaws make them invincible. People who've never had someone call their bluff. I wasn't going to argue or retaliate. Not right away. I just kept documenting everything. I took photos. I logged timestamps. I scanned every notice she dropped off. I copied emails. Because while she thought she was building a case against me, What she was really doing was building a case against herself. And I was going to let her keep digging until she hit bedrock. Still, I hoped naively that it would stop at pettiness. That maybe one morning I'd wake up and find the war over a garden hose wasn't the hill she wanted to die on. But then I caught her peeking over my fence. Not once, not twice, but 3 different times in 1 week. Just standing there, silently, trying to observe what I was doing with my irrigation controls. That's when I knew. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was obsessed, and she was about to make a mistake big enough to drown in. It started with subtle threats, passive-aggressive notes, and bureaucratic nitpicks. But like all bullies who mistake politeness for weakness, Karen escalated quickly when she didn't get the reaction she wanted. I had remained calm, respectful, and strictly by the book. I double-checked the HOA regulations, cross-referenced every watering time, kept a digital log of every garden hose use, and even installed a timer-triggered valve system to ensure compliance down to the second. Still, the citations kept coming. Excessive water pressure used to rinse driveway. Unauthorized plant hydration outside of drought compliance code. Suspicious high-flow hose seen during unapproved hours. She wasn't citing violations, she was inventing them. I even received a warning after misting my Japanese maple tree with a garden sprayer. And when I confronted her with calm professionalism about her overreach, she smiled like I was the one in the wrong and said, "I'm simply enforcing the standards." We all agreed to them. Karen had adopted a tone I recognized from boardroom bureaucrats I'd outmaneuvered for decades. Condescending, calculated, and overconfident. I'd heard that tone from city council members who tried to block budget increases, from developers who skirted permits, and from politicians who assumed the water utility was some mindless machine they could bend to their will. Karen was no different. She thrived on imagined authority and targeted people who didn't push back. Only this time she'd chosen the wrong person. One morning, she cornered me on the sidewalk during my usual walk with a mug of coffee and clipboard in hand. "You should really reconsider your water use," she said, voice syrupy. "We've had anonymous complaints." I laughed softly. "Anonymous, huh?" Sounds suspiciously like one person. She blinked. "Don't be sarcastic, Mr. Wells. If this keeps up, we might have to take more serious action." That's when the threats stopped being passive. 2 days later, I received a formal notice from the HOA's Compliance Committee, of which Karen was the sole active member, informing me that pending a full water use investigation, I was being placed on a 30-day water restriction protocol, under which outdoor water use was prohibited and indoor flow could be monitored and limited. I nearly choked on my coffee. Monitored and limited? That wasn't just unenforceable. It was wildly illegal. The HOA didn't control utilities. They had no jurisdiction over municipal water. This was like a neighborhood Facebook group declaring martial law. Still, I didn't react the way Karen wanted me to. Instead, I called a meeting with my legal counsel, logged every document she'd sent, and prepared a formal notice of overreach. But even I didn't expect what she did next. Late one Thursday night, I caught her on my security camera standing near the water meter access panel at the edge of my property. At first, I thought she was just inspecting it. Karen was nosy, not brave. But she knelt down, pulled something from her oversized purse, and began tampering with the valve. I zoomed in on the footage. She had a municipal-style water shutoff key. She wasn't just threatening anymore. She was trying to cut my water herself. That's when I realized she didn't just believe she had power. She believed she could fake it. I checked the valve after she left. It was partially closed, just enough to reduce pressure and make showers sputter. The pond refill slowed to a trickle, and the washer take forever to fill. The next morning, I received a new letter from her. This time, it was smug. Due to excessive usage beyond approved thresholds, your property has been temporarily placed under HOA water restriction enforcement. Please note this may include physical flow adjustments. Physical flow adjustments. She was trying to bluff her way into utility control. What she didn't know was that every meter in this neighborhood fed into our utility's smart monitoring system. And when I pulled the logs, I could see exactly when the flow changed, how much it dropped, and most importantly, the location data pinged from the tamper alert embedded in the box, the same alert that had been triggered at 11:14 p.m. the moment Karen made her move. That was the final straw. She had no idea what she just walked into. I contacted our general counsel, filed a report under Municipal Utility Code 113A, unauthorized tampering with a regulated water system, and issued an internal investigation to determine who had accessed utility assets. Our data confirmed unauthorized access. I matched the physical evidence to the digital logs. And then I filed a formal criminal complaint with the county. Karen thought she was dealing with a guy who liked gardening too much. She didn't realize she had picked a fight with a person who literally controlled every drop of water in the system she was trying to dominate. And now she was going to find out what happens when you try to play God with the actual utility company. The moment I confirmed that Karen had tampered with my water access, I activated every tool and protocol at my disposal, and trust me, being the CEO of the region's water company doesn't just come with a fancy corner office, it comes with a full arsenal of resources. Within an hour, I submitted the incident report directly to our security division and flagged it as a Level 3 utility breach. Not only was her unauthorized interference a clear violation of multiple local codes, it was also a breach of municipal safety regulations, considering water infrastructure falls under critical services protection laws. Normally, these kinds of incidents are reserved for city contractors cutting into main lines or industrial clients bypassing meters. Karen was about to discover the hard way that what she did wasn't just illegal, it was federally traceable. I ordered our response team to pull the data from the district monitoring logs. When I reviewed the thermal sensor log from the meter cover, there it was, her exact body heat signature at the time of tampering, verified by motion data and time-stamped infrared exposure. It was undeniable, and I wasn't going to waste it. I contacted a colleague at the County Utilities Commission, briefed them on the situation, and forwarded the logs. Then I filed a formal grievance through the State Utility Regulatory Office, complete with video stills, sensor logs, witness documentation, and an annotated PDF detailing the timeline of every citation, threat, and tampering attempt. That packet alone was over 85 pages long. By the time I was done, Karen had not only violated my rights as a homeowner, she had potentially violated half a dozen state and local codes, a few of which carried criminal penalties. And I hadn't even told her yet. I wanted the moment to hit with the full weight of everything she had done. I got that chance at the next HOA meeting. It was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in the community clubhouse, the kind with uncomfortable chairs, a suspiciously stained carpet, and stale lemon cookies from last month's Costco run. I arrived 10 minutes early with a laptop, 2 large binders, and a printed letterhead from the Department of Utilities. Karen was already seated at the front, smug and poised with her clipboard, sipping from a stainless steel tumbler with Lakeview Ridge President etched on the side like a badge of honor. She didn't acknowledge me as I walked in, but I didn't need her to. Everyone else noticed. The room was more crowded than usual. Word of our water dispute had clearly made its way around. I waited patiently through the first 10 minutes of procedural fluff before Karen finally raised her voice and said, "Before we continue, I'd like to address the issue of excessive water use at one of our residences, particularly the home at 1745 Maple Drive." That was my address. She turned to the crowd. Despite multiple warnings, this resident has continued to engage in unsanctioned outdoor watering, including koi pond refills, high-pressure washing, and garden misting outside of allowed times. We were forced, she actually used the word forced, to impose physical water flow limits. That was my cue. I stood. "Are you referring to the unauthorized tampering with my municipal water supply conducted at 11:14 p.m. on a Thursday evening?" The room froze. Karen blinked. I don't know what you mean." I opened the laptop, projecting the footage onto the screen behind her. There she was, crouching, wrench in hand, twisting the shut-off valve. Audible gasps rippled through the room. "This," I continued, "is an illegal act under County Code 7.18.940, as well as a violation of Public Utilities Safety Act Section 3. Karen McDougal, as of this moment, you are under official investigation by the Department of Utilities and the State Regulatory Commission." She dropped her pen. Literally. It bounced on the table. "You can't be serious," she said, voice trembling. "It was just a warning." I cut her off. "You don't issue warnings with illegal tools on critical utility equipment. You trespassed, tampered with city property, endangered infrastructure, and interfered with a service that's essential to life. You didn't just overstep. You committed a crime." There was silence. Then someone in the back muttered, "Holy crap." Another whispered, "She's toast." Karen stood up, stammering. "This is a misunderstanding. He's exaggerating. He's just bitter because he can't follow simple HOA rules. Would you like to explain that to the state investigator who called me this morning to confirm the footage?" I asked. Or perhaps you'd like to review the formal cease and desist letter delivered to your mailbox today via certified mail. I held it up. Her name glared in bold across the front. Effective immediately, you are to cease all enforcement actions, communication, or administrative functions in this neighborhood until the investigation is concluded. Failure to comply will result in escalated charges and a referral to the district attorney's office. Karen sat down. She didn't say another word. I turned to the board. I move that we table all further discussion regarding my property until this matter is resolved legally. And I strongly suggest this HOA reconsider its leadership protocol. No one objected. No one defended her. By the time I walked out, Karen was still sitting there, pale and shaking, her tumbler untouched. She tried to shut off my water. Instead, she just shut down her entire reign of fake power. Karen had always strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it, clipboard in hand, visor on head, her smile laced with superiority and entitlement. But after the water tampering incident went public, her aura of invincibility evaporated overnight. The investigation launched by the Department of Utilities picked up steam almost instantly once the evidence was reviewed. Her unauthorized use of a shut-off key, video footage of her trespassing on utility property, sensor data proving tampering, and the formal complaints I filed through internal and municipal channels. Within a week, she was slapped with 2 misdemeanor citations and 1 civil violation for interference with municipal infrastructure. And if she thought that was the worst of it, she hadn't counted on the ripple effect that would hit both her ego and the neighborhood's trust in her leadership. The state regulatory office mailed formal notifications to the HOA board, the neighborhood legal counsel, and per her own bylaws, every registered homeowner. The envelope came with her name printed on the front and the words ongoing utility tampering investigation, immediate suspension of authority. When that letter landed in every mailbox on Lakeview Ridge, the tide turned completely. Suddenly, I wasn't the guy with a koi pond. I was the neighbor Karen had tried to ruin, and in doing so, she revealed the extent of her obsession with control. Neighbors started to open up. One by one, they shared stories, how she'd fined someone $250 for having a patriotic garden flag, threatened a teenager over washing their car in their driveway, and demanded a couple paint their front door more neutral. The real twist came when the HOA board, desperate to distance themselves from her, called for an emergency vote to remove Karen permanently. It wasn't a quiet vote. It was a public meeting, and word spread fast. More than half the neighborhood showed up. People brought folding chairs. Some brought snacks. One guy even live-streamed it. I arrived quietly, standing near the back as Karen walked into the room, visibly nervous, clutching a manila folder as if it might defend her somehow. But she had no defense left. One board member, who had clearly been biting his tongue for months, laid it all out. This HOA exists to uphold standards, not to weaponize them. What happened with Mr. Wells's water supply was not a misunderstanding. It was an abuse of power. The room clapped. Karen blinked like she didn't recognize the sound. Then came the vote. Final tally, 42-2. She was removed as HOA president effective immediately. She wasn't just banned from holding office again. She was stripped of all authority. No more rule setting. No more citations. No more Karen. The HOA updated their charter days later, limiting presidential authority, establishing oversight, and banning enforcement-related action without full board approval. I may have left the meeting quietly, but I was greeted with a round of quiet nods, thank yous, and even a few applause from people I barely knew. Karen, on the other hand, left the clubhouse alone, her visor folded in half in her hand. No clipboard, no retorts, no followers. But it didn't stop there. The story of the HOA water tampering scandal got picked up by a regional news outlet, thanks to a reporter whose cousin happened to live in the neighborhood. The headline was brutal: HOA president tampered with water supply. Didn't know victim was utility CEO. It went viral on local Facebook groups, then Reddit, then somehow TikTok. A clip of her fiddling with a water meter, followed by my court filing overlay, became a trending sound. Mess around and find out, CO edition. The memes were ruthless. Someone even printed t-shirts that said, "Don't test the tap." Karen tried to salvage her image, issuing a weak apology through a letter dropped in neighbors' mailboxes. Most people tossed it. A few taped it to their garbage bins. My favorite neighbor, Mike, drew a water droplet on his and wrote, "I forgive you, the hose god." Karen's apology didn't matter anymore. She lost the one thing she truly craved: control. She began keeping her blinds closed, avoided neighborhood events, and skipped garbage day regularly, hoping people would forget. But people don't forget, not when your downfall is a combination of viral schadenfreude and justice. Eventually, she listed her house for sale. Quietly. No sign in the yard. Just a Zillow listing from a third-party agent and an owner prefers remote closing note. When she left, no one waved. No one said goodbye. A few people clinked drinks on their porches. Someone left a small water balloon in her empty driveway. I can't prove it, but I know who did it, and I know why. As for me, I'm still here. Still watering my garden. Still running the regional water utility. My koi pond is thriving. My neighbors now wave instead of whisper. And when I walk past the old HOA bulletin board, I smile at the new president's notice. No visor, no threats, just friendly reminder. Water your plants. They need it. Karen taught the entire neighborhood a lesson in what happens when fake power meets real authority. And in the end, she wasn't just removed. She was washed away.